Nick Thomas-Symonds, is about to join us. He's a former barrister, so one of the perfect people we can talk to about it. We're also going to talk to him, of course, about that OBR report that we mentioned already with Mari, and, of course, the key takeaways of the ongoing state visit that President Macron is having here in the UK over the next 48 hours, kicking off yesterday, of course, with that state banquet. Well, I'm delighted to say I am joined now by the Paymaster General, Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's also led the EU renegotiations. Great to have you with us. Good morning,
Great to join you.
Why don't we pick up, first of all, on that Leveson review? And as I mentioned, you're a former barrister, so it's an area that you know a lot about. Central to it is obviously trying to reduce the backlogs versus not wanting to break the principles that the justice system upholds. If you do drop the right to a jury for crimes that would only get up to a 2-year sentence, is that a principle that we should continue to hold dear? And is the payoff, which the report I think acknowledges, not rich enough, I guess? It doesn't significantly reduce the backlogs.
Well, firstly, the report that Sir Brian Leveson has produced is a very serious piece of work. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood faced the situation coming into office of a justice system, frankly, in crisis. That's why we asked Sir Brian Leveson to conduct an independent review. We have tens of thousands of people waiting in the Crown Court backlog. Now, we've already taken some action. We have already, for example, increased the number of Crown Court sitting days by 4,000. We've invested £450 million in the criminal justice system. We've increased magistrate sentencing powers. But to your point about trial by jury, now, Sir Brian Leveson has produced a series of, very thoughtful proposals to deal with this. It's always been the case in our criminal justice system that some trials have been dealt with via a jury, some have not. I mean, more than 90% of our criminal cases are dealt with in the magistrates' courts as it stands. But with that proposal and all the other proposals, we will now look carefully at them with a view to legislating in the autumn. It's a very serious piece of work Sir Brian Leveson has done. Obviously,
there's also a proposal for those that plead guilty at the first instance that you could reduce the discount to their sentence by more than currently, from 33% down to 40%. And you do pair that with some of the early releases that are happening either by design or by the pressure on the system. What would be the government's response to the idea that criminals aren't being sufficiently punished?
Well, we are determined to ensure that we deal with crime in this country. That is why we'll have additional neighbourhood police officers in terms of crime detection. But let me just take the criminal justice system, because this is important. We were left with a situation where we had our prisons essentially at breaking point. They were being run so close to capacity that we were running the risk of literally having a situation in this country where judges wouldn't be able to send people to prison. Now, I'm sure I'd have to tell those who are watching this the consequences that would have for safety on our streets and for crime. And that is because the previous government simply did not build the prison places that were needed over the 14 years that they were in power. Now, we are going to add those additional prison places, but you can't just produce them instantly. So what we have to do is take difficult decisions to ensure we keep the public safe. But that is where you are left if you are left with a prison system that is bursting at the seams as it was.
Let's talk about President Macron, who's obviously in town, and there's talks that there's going to be a one-in, one-out system of some form with illegal boat crossings. Can you expand on that? Is that an ambitious enough plan for the UK to be pursuing?
Well, look, I'm not going to give a running commentary on specific proposals, but what I will say about the work that we're doing jointly with the French authorities is absolutely crucial. Now, look, I've been down to Dover, I've been across to France, I've seen the work that is going on, and only in recent weeks we've seen, for example, 9 people in a court in Lille, with help from our National Crime Agency, sentenced to a total of 64 years in prison for people smuggling offences. We've seen, again, great work from the National Crime Agency in tracking down a people smuggler in Coventry for smuggling people between Belgium and the United Kingdom. And we've also, in the time we've been in office, prevented 12,000 people from crossing the Channel who otherwise would have done, but for the joint work that we're doing. Now, this is not an easy issue. I'm not suggesting for a moment that there is a silver bullet, but that joint working is absolutely crucial to trying to get down the boat numbers in the Channel.
But I guess, I mean, you mentioned 12,000 have been stopped that would have otherwise crossed, but but 20,000 have made it across so far this year. It's at a record since they began in 2018. So I guess thus far, this joint approach, this warm and friendly approach, hasn't worked so far?
Well, we've prevented 12,000 people from otherwise crossing. And I know we talked about the numbers in the first part of the year, but there was a 10-week period, for example, in the summer of 2022 when 20,000 people made that crossing. Now, we can talk about the numbers, but the truth is none of us want to see people in those boats making that dangerous crossing across the Channel. But there's no doubt that the joint working is effective. But of course we need to do more. That is why the government is also making the choice to give our law enforcement terrorism-style powers to deal with the crime of people smuggling. And that's, by the way, a choice this government is making to do even more. That's being opposed by both Reform and the Conservatives in Parliament. So, of course, we need to do more. But the choice we are making is trying to deal with this issue in a practical way that is going to make a difference. Not slogans, but actually making a difference.
Well, again, with all due respect, so far, your policies aren't making a difference.
Well, they are making a significant difference because of the numbers that we have prevented from crossing the Channel. But I'm not suggesting for a moment there isn't more to do to get those numbers down. And that joint work with the French is a crucial part of that.
We'll wait with bated breath for if there's a further big policy to come on this one in, one out over the next couple of days. In terms of relations with the French more broadly, you've obviously led the renegotiation with the EU. We also heard Macron say he doesn't want to allow the Channel to grow wider, and he argued for exchanges for students, researchers and artists. It was a line that got quite broad positive response in Parliament. Is that new to you in terms of the negotiations that you've done with the EU? Is that additional to what was already agreed, or is that kind of part of the plan yet to be kind of finalised?
No, those are matters that are already within the common understanding, the new strategic partnership we have with the European Union. I think that the government has already set out, we move to a smart, balanced, controlled youth experience scheme, which will involve young people in the United Kingdom having the opportunity to go out to Europe, and young Europeans then be able to come here. As I say, it will be smart and controlled. Secondly, we are looking already in the common understanding at whether we can have a new relationship with the Erasmus Plus scheme, which is a student exchange scheme. We will only do that, though, on a value-for-money basis. And thirdly, I was very pleased to see the reference to artists, because one of the things we want to take forward is to allow our touring artists, our musicians, our fantastic cultural sector to be able to tour around the European Union more easily, which in recent years is something they haven't been able to do.
I wanted to touch on the OBR report, which was a sort of long-term report looking forward at our financing, fairly sobering kind of conclusions in it. Is it fair to say that a lot of what is promised to this country, to all voters of all political persuasions, isn't affordable going forward, and that we need a kind of wake-up moment in this country of what is possible in both the short and medium term?
Well, 2 points. I think, firstly, that report speaks to the structural weaknesses that we've inherited in our economy. And that is why this government has been right to put financial stability as the foundation stone of all our other policies, because without it, you can't have those other policies. But to the point you're asking about affordability, look, we are still a few months out from the budget, but what you can be assured of is when the Chancellor presents that budget in the autumn, where there are promises, where there are policies taken forward, we will always point to where the money is coming from, and that's the approach we've taken throughout.
I guess linked in my question is whether some of the rebels that you faced as a government last week need to read the report and realise that not every policy is possible, that these things come with a cost. Is there a sort of lack of clarity and understanding by some members of the left of your party about what is achievable?
No, I think in terms of what happened with the welfare vote last week, we've accepted that we went too quickly, and everybody has agreed that the existing system is broken and not working. We did move too quickly in terms of change. It is really important to take people with us, and that is what happened with parliamentary colleagues last week. But to the broader point, we were, as Labour MPs. We were elected with the mandate we were to government last year. And it was on a recognition that we would collectively never allow what happened with Liz Truss and the damage she did to our economy to happen again. And that is accepted right across the party, and that is why financial stability is the foundation stone this government's built on. And that is a different choice, by the way, to the risks that were taken by the previous government.
Just want to touch on one aspect of it that's got a lot of attention in the OBR report, the state pension, because we focus on winter fuel, was going to save or not save £1 billion. We focus on the welfare adjustments last week, was going to save or not save £5 billion. The state pension costs £125 billion per year. It's 46% of the overall welfare budget. All these forecasts show how much it's ballooning in the years ahead and ballooned in the last couple of years. Do you have to look at the state pension?
No, we've promised that we will maintain the triple lock for this Parliament. That is what we will do. People do deserve dignity in retirement, but it's also about the fact that pensioners who've contributed so much to our society are then in retirement. They are not in the position as other people in the population are to be able to add to their income. They tend to be people who are on fixed incomes. So we will absolutely be sticking to that pledge.
And no means testing for it, like the winter fuel payment?
No, we will be sticking to our pledge on the triple lock.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, great to see you. Thanks so much
Pleasure.
for joining us. The Paymaster General